Welcome to the world of impossible. I'd like to share my favorite quote of all times with you. I have a fridge magnet on the very front of my fridge, so before I have breakfast every day, I have to read this before I have my morning coffee and my toast. One can't believe impossible things, said Alice. I dare say you haven't tried, said the Queen. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Lewis Carroll from the classic Alice in Wonderland. On December 21st, 1997, I drove off a 6,000-foot cliff, both literally and physically. This event was to forever transform my life. I had reached a pinnacle in my personal achievements. I had found my soulmate. I was working at a challenging job. I was at peak physical fitness. I was living in an idyllic town surrounded by snow-capped mountains, palm trees in the desert. I felt like I had arrived. I was so happy and so fulfilled at that time in my life. I remember actually getting up one morning and saying to God, "This is it. There is nothing else I want for or aspire to." I felt like I was at the top of the world and it couldn't get any better. Well, you've all heard the saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. It was December 21st, 1997, the winter solstice, at 8:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning, that I decided to take a drive up this 8,000-foot cliff that surrounded the city where I lived in. And at the 8,000-foot elevation, there was a monastery, and I wanted to go for morning prayers. I had traveled up there before, but never in the winter months, only in the summer months. I get into my Jeep Cherokee. I'm living in the desert. I have shorts on and a little top. I'm really happy that day. I'm singing. I have the windows rolled down. It's a warm day. And I start my drive up the mountain. You can see a little bit of the road here as you enter into the foot of the mountain. You can see a little bit of the highway. So the highway winds through the inside of the mountain. It flattens out. It goes around the curve of the mountain. And there are no guardrails on this mountain, this natural wonder of nature. So every once in a while you look and there's a steep drop off. You go inland a bit. So it's quite a dramatic, beautiful, breathtaking drive up this mountain. Well, about halfway through the trip, I see ahead of me on the road an enigmatic woman standing in the distance at one of these flat places. And I think, being the good Catholic girl I was raised to be and knowing the story of the Good Samaritan, what is her story? Is she escaping from a dangerous situation? Did she escape and walk to the side of the road? And even though by picking her up and helping her to her home, I knew I would miss the window for morning prayers, that was the right thing to do. I picked her up. She got into my Jeep Cherokee. We drove along for a while. And she didn't say very much. She was pensive and silent. But when she did speak, she said, "I'm a mother. I've been in the desert, and I have to get back to my children." Very odd experience in the car with her that day. A little further along, she asked me to drop her off. It was still in the middle of nowhere, but I respected her wishes. I asked her, "Are you sure that you're safe?" And she acknowledged yes. But before I pulled away, she leaned in the open window and she said, with a long, compassionate face, "Don't drive off the cliff today." Now, I grew up in northern Ontario, Sault Ste. Marie, where snowstorms are a way of life. This girl was not going to drive off any cliff today. So I assured her that I would be fine, but I thanked her for her concern. And I pulled away. And I thought, what a totally odd experience. So I looked in the rear view mirror of my car, I looked in the side mirrors, and because we were at a flat area, I was able to look 360 degrees around me, no one there. I got really spooked and I thought, okay, this is a message from God, from the divine. In some way, I'm supposed to slow down and be mindful and take my time. So I did slow down, and as I mentioned, I had never been up there in the winter, and as I continued to go up through the elevations, snow started to hit my windshield. I had to roll up the windows. I had to turn on my windshield wipers, and it started hitting the windshield faster and faster. And I became very agitated and nervous, especially after picking up this enigmatic woman. So I carefully rounded a corner. My wheels of my Jeep must have hit black ice because it fishtailed out from under me and it started rolling over the cliff at about 6,000 feet. It rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. I couldn't steer because it was rolling, it was in drive, I had my seatbelt on. I had to let go and let God. I had no choice. I had no say in this. As I was rolling, although it happened very quickly, I had time to reflect on my life. And I thought, when I woke up and looked in the mirror this morning and brushed my teeth, I had no idea I was going to die today. How could I possibly survive this plunge off the cliff? It's absolutely impossible. And then I thought, it could be worse. I could break my neck or I could break my back, and I would have to live out my life like that. Adrenaline was pumping, I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, and I was totally horrified. Then a small thought made its way to the front of my consciousness. My mother had had a heart attack recently at that time, and I thought, oh no, they're gonna call my mother and say, we're so sorry, your daughter died today. And I think there's nothing worse for a parent than having the grief of having your child die before them. And in that moment of great compassion for my mother, a miracle happened. And my Jeep stopped upside down by a boulder, and I was left hanging in my lap belt, in my seat belt, like in a parachute harness upside down. I didn't know it at the time because I was in a state of abject shock. I had broken my ribs in the front and the back from the trauma of rolling over and over. I had injured my neck. I was full of shards of glass. There's another picture coming up here. And so here I am trapped upside down, and I had the wherewithal to pinch my arm and leg to see if it was safe to move in case I was paralyzed. So I'm hanging there, and I hear this voice from inside my head, beyond, who knows, but I heard this urgent voice say, get out, get out, get out. And I was trapped. I couldn't get out. My body weight was hanging me upside down like this in the lap belt. So you never know what's going to come in handy in your lifetime. You never know when a teacher has inspired you. You've learned something in history class, in sports. You never know when something may actually save your life. I had studied yoga. I had the wherewithal to put my legs into full lotus posture, crawl out of the lap belt harness, crawl free of the Jeep, when at that moment another car must have hit the same black ice and flew over the cliff and started tumbling down. Now, what are the chances of a forest ranger at just that nanosecond looking across the canyon with his binoculars for a forest fire, seeing these two accidents happen and radioing for ambulances? Impossible? I would have thought so. An ambulance brought me to Desert Urgent Care, and they ran a battery of tests on me. I had a CAT scan, I had an MRI, X-rays, ultrasound. They placed me in critical care, and they said, you're not out of danger yet. You could have punctured a lung, ruptured a spleen. So they allowed me to call my family. I called my family in Sault Ste. Marie, and I asked them to begin a prayer circle. That was the only thing I could think to do because my life was still in God's hands, in that balance of the unknown. So it wasn't long before I could actually feel the energy, like the poster for creative and reflective thinking. I felt this like a ball of yarn surround me. I could actually feel the prayers and the well wishes of my family helping me to get better, and that really encouraged me to go on and make it through the night. It wasn't long before I heard a voice on the other side of the curtain in critical care. It was 2 police officers who had been called to the site of the accident, and they pulled back the curtain. Their faces were ashen white, and they said, "Are you the girl from the Jeep crash this morning?" They said, "We just towed the vehicle to the yard. It's impossible that anyone could have survived that." Well, my test came back, and miraculously, other than the broken ribs and other injuries I had, there was no operation or surgery that they could do. So they released me to my friends in the desert to stay, and they ordered me not to travel for 5 months back to Canada. By the time I traveled back to Canada, I was in constant, chronic, blinding pain. My ribs did not heal properly. I couldn't lay down on my back. I couldn't roll on my side. I quit sleeping for 3 months. I was hysterical. My life as I knew it was gone. I was an actor, a dancer, a singer. I relied on the strength of my body and my vitality. I identified with that as who I was, and now I felt like a ball of nothing. All of that was taken from me. My romantic partner, my work, my income, and I was just reduced to total despair. It was December 23rd, a year later, 1998, that I went to a church in Toronto and I did a novena to the Virgin Mary. I was weeping and weeping and weeping. This wasn't even my congregation, but I had just reached rock bottom. I really thought about taking my life that night. And I called my parents from a phone booth and I said, "I'm so sorry, but I just can't go on. It's impossible that I will ever have a productive life again." An orthopedic surgeon had said to me, "You're going to be sentenced to a life of narcotic painkillers, and you'll never be a functional, contributing part of society again." I went home to my friend's house where I was sleeping on a couch. I had no money, I had no job. My romantic partner left me. Everyone abandoned me one by one, and I was just stripped away, stripped away, stripped away. And I fell into a disturbed sleep. And in that sleep, I had a very strange dream that is with me to this day. And that dream has forever changed the trajectory of my life. In that dream, I saw this robed figure with a turban, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, a 13th century Sufi mystic and saint from the Persian Empire. He was a contemporary of St. Francis of Assisi. He wrote this beautiful mystical love poetry to God, and in fact, 20 years running, he's outsold Shakespeare in the English language. He died 800 years ago, but his writing still lives on today. And he's loved by people of many generations, many different cultures and religious backgrounds. Now, I had been at a conference 13 years before where they had displayed his picture, and I remembered hearing one of his poems. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, ideas, language, even the words each other don't make any sense. Now, when I had this dream, after a plea to the Virgin Mary for help to save me for some kind of answer. I had seen this saint surrounded by people that I knew from my 20 years as a professional actor in the theater. There were musicians, dancers, actors, and they seemed to be in some kind of theatrical situation reciting his poetry. Well, I woke up in the morning, and as you can imagine, I'm suffering from depression. I really didn't know what this was all about. I mean, it certainly was impossible in my brokenness, in my insomnia, in my having no desire to go on, that I certainly could dance or sing again or be happy or be part of an event, let alone produce an event like that. But something spoke to me about the dream, about the woman on the mountain, and about all of these impossible things that had happened in my life. And I thought, well, I owe it to myself at least to see where this is leading me. I called around to the people that I saw in the dream, friends of mine from the theater, and told them about my brokenness and about the dream about Rumi. And they said, yeah, let's do it. Let's have this great big cultural event. Let's rent a theater. Let's do his poetry in Greek cacophony. Let's dance his poetry, sing it, do it in pantomime, Native American Sign Language. So I get off the phone, I'm completely overwhelmed, and I'm going, this is impossible. Like, I don't even live anywhere. I'm on a couch. And these people are not going to pay for it. There's no money. How is this going to happen? Well, 8 months later, 1,000 people attended an event that we put together, a small group of us, with no advertising, no marketing, no publicity, no money for a down payment on the rental space, no money for the union stagehands, and yet it happened. Impossible? I would have said so at that time. Let's take a look at that word impossible, the definition from Merriam-Webster dictionary. Incapable of being or occurring. Felt to be incapable of being done, attained, or fulfilled. Let's go to the next slide. Impossible. Even the word itself, taking a look at it, it looks impossible. I invite you to take a look at that word in a fresh way today. I'm possible. Let's break up that word. And again, I am possible. By just that small shift to that word, impossible, when we break it up, when we bring the presence of the I, the spirit, our faith, our belief, our tenacity, our courage to the equation, everything changes. Think about all of the things that were thought to be impossible in my parents' generation, your grandparents' generation, even as soon as 10 years ago. It was thought to be impossible that a black man would ever be president of the United States of America, and yet Barack Obama is now sitting in his second term. It was virtually impossible that a little-known nun who took a vow of poverty could change the face of the world forever through her simple acts of kindness and compassion. And yet Mother Teresa, who you've all heard of, after her death, the missionaries of charity continue her work with the poor, with the disembodied, the disenfranchised, in over 133 countries around the world. In my grandparents' generation, it was thought to be impossible that a man could ever stand on the surface of the moon, and yet we've traveled to Mars as a civilization, and we have men and women living in a space station year-round that circles planet Earth. Just recently, a group of students, not much older than you, managed to topple a regime of terror in Egypt, Mubarak. Military leaders and world governments over a span of 3 decades could not dethrone this dictator from his reign of terror, and yet through Facebook friends and the internet, In only 18 days, a group of youth your age, through nonviolent protest, managed to end his reign of terror. Let's go back to the top, to the quote I began with today, and let's look at it with fresh eyes. One can't believe impossible things, said Alice. I dare say you haven't tried, said the Queen. Why, when I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Believing changes everything. Have an I'm possible day. Thank you.